Hi everybody, this is Holly from Hot Humble Pie. Today I am taking part in the Farmhouse DIY challenge hosted by the creative and very sweet Heidi Sambal. Her link to her channel is below in my description box, as well as the playlist with all the other wonderful creators that are also part of the Farmhouse challenge. And if you haven't gone and checked out her channel, please make sure you do, as well as that playlist. And if you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, I would love it if you hit that button. DIY number 1. And today we found sweet little Miss Piggy at the Goodwill when I was thrifting 6 months ago. 50% off. It cost me 50 cents. I never go unless it's 50% off. I never spend more than $3 unless it's a really, really good deal like furniture, or if something is real like wrought iron or something, I might consider going above $3, but I'm a bargain shopper for sure. And so I'm just going to remove her paraphernalia, her bow and the little fence on the surface. And you'll have to excuse my kitty scratches on my hand. Actually, it's not my cat that scratches me. He's really gentle. He is so sweet. But if his little claw just hits me at all, I am so allergic that I will be the one that will itch and actually tear my skin off there. So you guys, sorry, I have a cat. And it's not exactly the cat doing it, but inadvertently it is the cat because I scratch. So anyway, I'm going ahead and tracing with some wax paper here to try and remember the shapes, like little ears and mouth and tail and legs, that I will need to put back on after I'm done painting her. And I'm just giving her one coat in my amazing DIY chalk paint. It's not baking soda and it's not plaster of Paris. It's something that most of you have in the house today, and if not, you can order it online. Super easy, super cheap, and as you can see, that is one coat, ladies and gents, if you're out there, and it performs amazing. In my opinion, it performs better, it's superior over the brand name big boys out there of chalk paint. So I will be uploading a DIY video on that either today or tomorrow, so keep an eye out for that and check it out when you get a chance. Here I'm just giving a little bit of gray, like dry brushing and edging this little piggy in some gray just to kind of make it look more vintage and rustic. And here's my favorite still. I know you can scribble pencil on the back, but I save ink like now. You can see it right there. I just put a piece of paper up to my computer screen and I trace out the words. It doesn't have to be perfect because it's not going to be perfect when you trace it out. But I love carbon paper. It's ink, and I wish I could find paint that looked like that because it looks so authentic and rustic. I went to an old flea market like 20 years ago and saw actual signs that were printed up over 100 years ago, and they were mostly ink. So I'm a big fan of carbon paper. I got that one at Amazon, a little over $3, 10 sheets. You can use each sheet 20 times, so it's about 200 sheets for a little over $3, so it's a great deal. You can't beat it. I've been using it for 6 months already, and I haven't even gone past the first sheet yet. So I'm just going to situate my words where I want them to be. I don't want them to be perfect because I don't want it to look like a cookie cutter stamp. I kind of want the piggy to go up at an angle. As you know, that's kind of the trick they do. You know how photographers, when they film, they purposely shake the camera to try and look like an amateur. I notice Hobby Lobby and a lot of the arts and crafts stores like Michael's, they sell these things and they purposely make it look homemade by making the words a little wonky. So I guess that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to make it look homemade, but it's really to make it look more like it's store-bought. So go figure that one out. Anyway, that's what I'm doing. And I just use a little bit of masking tape in the corner. That's a great method for me to hold it in place. It's good enough. And I move the little square of, I'm sure you can see what I'm doing, but I move the little square of carbon paper up, and just periodically I can flap it back like a curtain and just check to make sure I'm on target there with all the words. So I start off with a gray Sharpie. Yes, I do. Only to end up going over everything in black, you guys. I'm just showing you this and letting you know that I do use a gray Sharpie. I color the ears with some pencil. I'm going for a really light farmhouse look. And in the end, it's just too washed out, and I end up changing it up. But I thought I'd let you know in case you can see some color change there that isn't normally present during, like if you just use black. This is the explanation. And now I'm using my favorite burnt umber from Apple Barrel Paint and just shading in there between the legs to give the piggy a more definite shape and some definite legs. And here I am edging little Miss Piggy with the burnt umber just to give her that rustic aged old look that is so classic Farmhouse. And here she is, and I really love her. She came out a lot better than I expected. 50 cents. She's in my kitchen right now on a shelf, looks so cute, has added so much charm to my kitchen. I'm really pleased with the way that she turned out. DIY number 2. So on that same thrift day, I came across this lantern, and I couldn't believe it, to be honest. And it was really dirty. The glass was broken inside, so it did need some TLC. But I saw this on Home Talk the other day, and it wasn't even what they were showing. They were showing the plants next to it in an old baking dish. But I fell in love with that, and it was a GIF, you guys. It was moving, so it was really hard for me to get a screenshot there. But that's what I'm going for. That's my inspiration. I was pretty sure it was my identical lamp, and as I checked it out later, it was. So I was so happy. So we're going to try and get that look that we saw on Home Talk. And before I forget to mention, this was $4.99, so 50% off. It cost me $2.50. Now, I also had a pleasant surprise. Well, besides having to remove these little metal things, which came out really easy, because I decided I don't want glass. I want it to be more like an atrium lantern. I'm always going to have like fresh greenery in there. But it had an electric candle in there that had a timer, and it still worked. So I was really happy about that. But the candle was, very cheesy looking, but we'll address that later. So here I am again with my one coat DIY Holly Humble chalk paint. And I'm going really slow because honestly I don't want to take the hardware off. I could tell when I took the little rooftop off, I don't know if it's called a roof, but the top off, that the screws are really fragile, and I wasn't sure I was going to get them back in exactly right, and I didn't want to have any problems closing it. So I just took my time and went really carefully around the edges of the hardware there so that I don't have to take them off. And even though this chalk paint is one coat, I forgot when you paint these kinds of things with all little nooks and crannies. First of all, it took me forever. I think it took me 3 hours to paint this thing, but I had to hardly use any paint on my paintbrush because if I did, it dripped in all the little corners. I think you guys know what I'm talking about. If you paint, you can't avoid it when you have all little corners and angles like that. So you can see it's dripping already towards the front there. So I end up having to put a very light coat of the chalk paint on, and then I end up having to do 2 coats in places anyway, but normally that is a 1 coat chalk paint. Now, one of the things that is so corny about that candle is it's way too tall. And it's designed to look like it's melted quite a bit. So that doesn't make sense, because if it had melted to the extent where it was curling like that with uneven edges, it would have been like a 10-inch candle. So it would have been up in the rooftop. I don't know if it's a roof again, but so anyway, the candle's just corny, and I ended up taking out the bottom, and I decided to leave it out because there's no way for me to add a bottom in there without it being noticeable where the legs are in the front. So, and that's fine, because I actually like that it's open, because I get to push down my florals and push the candle down, and then the candle's the right height and the florals kind of get tucked in nice and tight all around, and it ends up being really, really pretty. So we leave the bottom out. And we are finally done painting it white. So here I am dry brushing some of the Apple Barrel Pewter Gray paint on. I love that color, very versatile for Farmhouse. But if you can't find it, don't stress, any gray will do. It's also the gray I use for Little Miss Piggy too, I forgot to mention that. Now here comes the rooftop for the lantern, and I'm choosing an iridescent silver, and it doesn't matter what iridescent silver, but I'm going for this kind of metal. I don't want to do galvanized. I really stressed about that, you guys. I was contemplating for hours, but I decided the galvanized would actually distract from the lantern a little bit too much. I tend to look at the galvanized metal more when I see a piece, any piece of craft work. I always first look at the galvanized metal, and I didn't want that to be the case. I wanted the actual lantern to be the center focal point. And here's the corny candle. You can totally see why. It's like shiny, shiny plastic. No candles look like that. It's really bad. I don't even know if you can see it on camera, but it's really bad. And I stressed about that too. I was thinking for a long time what I could do. I thought about putting, hot glue dripping down it, wax, and I thought, no, it'll chip off. I read up on so many different techniques you can do to give texture to shiny surfaces, and in the end I thought it's the chalk paint, because the chalk paint dries so super matte. It's wet right there, but it dries so velvety and matte, and if I sponge it on, it will give it just a little bit of texture, and it will look like real wax. And there you can see it does. It worked like a charm. I was so pleased. The candle is nice and short now. Looks realistic. And it's gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous. I love this lantern. It looks exactly like, well, I think it does, the one I saw on Home Talk. I just couldn't be happier. The candle works, and the candle looks like real wax now. It's not all silly looking and shiny. Love, love it. There it is when it's on. I love that lantern. DIY number 3. So I found this glass plate, and it's one of those glass plates that looks like it's plastic trying to look like glass or crystal. So I saw it, I really liked the shape of it. The shape was very charming, and I decided to give it a coat of my DIY chalk paint. I do have to give it 2 coats because it's glass, but this is actually the plate where it's the very first time I paint in a big way that I paint it glass. I do a small little vase with the actual video, but this is where I really get to test it out on super slick, shiny glass, and I discover the staying power, the way it adheres, beats the brand name chalk paint. And the one thing I really like about my DIY chalk paint is it comes up snow white. I mean, you can tint it any color you want because it's solid, you can make it whatever you want. But I love that. So I'm using the carbon paper again, and this time I do print up my words because I don't want to deal with all those flowers, the vines at the bottom. That's too much even for me to do on a computer screen. I would have a serious neck ache. So I just tape it on the top and push my carbon paper underneath and trace away. On this plate, I'm using a combination of colored pencils, the black Sharpie pen, and paint. Now I choose colored pencils. I've got the really expensive kind that are almost oily, so when I do it correctly, they literally look like an ink stamp. And I explained earlier in the vid why I like ink so much. That is just great for farmhouse. That's actually great for any vintage look. So I don't know why crafters don't talk a lot about colored pencils. I'm a big fan. I think they're underrated because I think that, well, you have to buy the expensive ones, but if you get the expensive ones, they are just a great option along with all the other, paint markers, paint pens, chalk pens. They're another great option for you if you're doing any kind of vintage craft work. Now here I should probably mention, you see me going back and forth with a marker pen. I'm actually having to dip it in paint because, as it turns out, I have that fine tip Sharpie. The chalk paint, and same thing goes with the Waverly chalk paint. When I try to write on it, the chalk paint dries out the tip and plugs it up no matter what I do. If you guys have any suggestions for that, on how to prevent that, I would love you to leave a comment below. But every time I try to do it, it clogs up the tip and then the marker doesn't work anymore. And it only does that with the fine tip pen, not with the thick one. I did shake it and wet it and scrub the tip really hard with like a rough surface, and I got it to work for a little while again, but then it did it again. So it's not an option for drawing on chalk paint, that's for sure. The chalk paint is too dry and it gives off some kind of dust or sealant that makes the tip dry out, and you can't, the ink doesn't come through it anymore. So just a word of warning. I decide that I'd like this plate to have the natural wear and tear look of enamelware with the little chips and the worn down edges, so that's what I'm doing right here. And here I'm just using my finger to soften it up so it looks like a legitimate scrape. And here the final results are, and I'm really pleased with this one too. I've got it in my farmhouse hutch in my living room, front and center. Looks really, really beautiful. Very, very happy with it. DIY number 4. So this is a quick one. I found this and it looks, well, I think it was originally from the 99-cent only store, but I got it for $1. And it's galvanized, but it looks just like the candle scenario. It is ridiculously shiny, like over the top stupid. And I had it in my living room for about 3 days and I thought, you gotta go, something's gotta give. So here I'm just giving it some of the pewter gray to try and soften up the shine. That's my first line of attack here, and it works. You'll see in a minute. And there it is, totally toned down, so it was a success. But I want it to look old, I mean really old, like an old, rusty, rustic milk can should. So I'm going to start putting some faux rust on it now. And I've talked about the importance too of using a baby wipe and smearing when you're doing any kind of vintage stuff. You can see me dabbing there with the baby wipe. I dab, I smear. It's to kind of make it look like it's not paint sitting on top of the metal, more like it's worked into the metal. And of course, you know, real rust would always look better, but we do our best. So there's my favorite burnt umber, and I'm going to go along the seams, like where the can is actually welded together, in the natural areas where the can, if it had been used for a long, long time, would have gotten rusted and corroded and old looking. And I'm really pleased with the way that this guy turned out. Oh, there it is. Legit, looks legit. It's awesome. No complaints. If you liked what you saw today on this video, you guys please give me a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I would love to have you. And until the next video, breathe deep, fret not, and do things that make you happy.